Dale woke up in a cold sweat, calming down immediately once he recognized the familiar surroundings of his own bed. A sense of relief washed over him. It was just a nightmare. Only moments ago he had been drowning in frigid water. It filled his nose, slid down his throat and invaded his lungs, preventing him from breathing. The shore was visible for fleeting seconds before it vanished. He was being pulled under the dark, chilling water. That terrifying memory still haunted his nightmares, so vivid and realistic that they left him drenched in sweat with a racing heart. Now, at 30, he was plagued by a deep-seated fear of water. He avoided swimming pools, lakes, rivers and seas. He enjoyed relaxing on the beach, sunbathing, grilling kebabs and having fun with friends, but he steered clear of the water. He couldn't even venture into the shallows. To him, the tranquil, dark waters concealed a lethal threat. He watched others swimming and diving with a sinking heart. Dale kept his fear a secret, never revealing it to anyone. When asked why he didn't swim, he simply replied that he couldn't. But that was a lie. Dale was an accomplished swimmer. He had even won regional competitions, with his trophies, medals and certificates proudly displayed by his mother. At the tender age of 12, he earned a sport category before a memorable seaside trip with his parents. This achievement filled him with pride. He felt heroic as the first in his group to reach such a milestone. Dale relished in his status as a distinguished swimmer and athlete, eager for everyone to recognize his expertise. At the beach, he looked with a mix of pride and mild disdain upon his peers, who were still frolicking in the shallow end with flotation aids. One evening, Dale went to the beach with his father, while his mother stayed back at the hotel to care for his younger sister, Hope. The little girl had fallen ill, likely due to food poisoning. The beach was quiet that day, with a refreshing breeze sweeping across. The sea appeared a bit choppy and unusually cold, signalling the end of the weeks-long heat. Dale noticed 2 local girls on the pier, their skin tanned to a deep shade, their feet bare, and their hair flowing freely in the wind. One of them, a slender blonde girl with piercing blue eyes, particularly captivated the boys' attention. Motivated to impress them, Dale decided to put on a performance. He stripped down to his bathing shorts and dove into the cold waves. "Be careful," his father warned. "The sea is rough, don't swim too far out." But Dale didn't seem to hear. He frolicked in the waves like a young dolphin, showing off his diving skills. The girls stopped their conversation to watch him, which thrilled Dale. He swam further away from the shore. His father, confident in his son's swimming abilities and maturity, left to buy some boiled corn. Suddenly, when he was quite a distance from the shore, his leg cramped painfully from the calf to the thigh. His body, which had previously obeyed every command, suddenly became uncooperative. He tried to paddle with his strong arms, but his lower body was pulling him down. With the shore too far away, there was no help in sight. Few visitors were present at the beach. The girls on the pier disregarded the boy who was striving to impress them, instead focusing their attention on something in the distance. Dale was terrified. He could no longer row due to the sharp pain in his leg, which caused his vision to darken. He then submerged underwater for the first time. All sounds faded away. The seagull's cry, distant laughter, the engine's noise, and a remote scooter. A constant hum filled his ears as he sank deeper into the overwhelming darkness. His lungs ached for air. Gathering his strength, he managed to surface briefly, took a quick breath, glanced at the seemingly distant shore, and submerged again. Dale surfaced several more times until his strength was completely depleted. His leg throbbed with pain, and he was consumed by fear. He sank to the bottom, realizing that he would never see the sun again. The darkness was terrifying, and he longed for the comfort of his mother's voice. As he started to feel dizzy from the lack of air, and his ears pounded intensely, he felt someone's strong, warm and reliable hands pulling him upwards, towards the light, people and sun. The boy clung tightly to his rescuer and began climbing up the man's wet back. The man pulled him away from himself firmly, and Dale submerged back into the cold, dangerous water. Fear flooded the boy's heart, and he reached for his rescuer again. "Don't squirm, we'll both sink," the boy heard a strained male voice. This sobered him, reminding him of his coach's stories about the behaviour of drowning people who often hindered their own rescues. It was difficult, but the boy stopped resisting, allowing the man to pull him towards the shore. Even in such a terrible situation, Dale noticed that his rescuer was an excellent swimmer. The man supported the boy's chest with one hand, while the other stroked through the water with confidence and skill. The shore was nearing. Finally, the boy felt the ground beneath his feet and began to cry only after he had pressed against it. The man helped him out of the water. To the 12-year-old boy, the man seemed old but strong, tanned and muscular. It was only when the boy grew up that he realized his rescuer had only been around 50 years old. "Are you okay?" the man asked, examining the boy carefully. "Never go into the sea in this weather again. Understand?" "Understood," the boy nodded, thinking that after this experience he was unlikely to ever go into the water again. He studied the face of the man who had saved him from a terrible fate. Brown eyes, bushy dark eyebrows, emerging bald spots, and a thin scar stretching from the forehead to the upper lip. The scar, whitish against his tanned skin, was clearly visible. "I need to get going," the man said, obviously in a hurry. "Take care." He then almost sprinted along the shore. Dale watched him until he disappeared behind the rows of market stalls. On the other side, his father was approaching, returning with hot dogs purchased from a cafe further from the shore. He had seen the stranger pulling Dale's limp body from the water. "What happened?" he asked, gripping Dale's shoulders and studying his face. Fear was evident in the man's eyes. He was on the verge of panic. I almost drowned," Dale sobbed and clung to his father. The man stroked his son's back and head, murmuring soothing words while trying to calm his hysterical son and find out what had happened. "I went in deep, then my leg cramped up, and I started to drown. Dad, I thought I was going to die. I thought I'd never see you again. But he saved me. He pulled me out of the water. Where did he go? Dad? I didn't even get a chance to thank him." "He ran off behind the tents," the father replied, scanning the surroundings. "I caught a glimpse of him." Once Dale regained his senses, he and his father set out to find the stranger who had given the boy a second chance at life. They roamed the nearby market, asking vendors about the man with the scar. Everyone shrugged, except a woman selling brightly coloured rubber rings, who pointed towards the village. "That's where he went, with a little girl on his shoulders." Undeterred, Dale and his father ventured to the village. However, no one there knew anything about the man with the scar. For the remainder of his vacation, Dale never swam in the sea again. He showed up on the beach daily, hoping to meet his rescuer, but the sea now terrified him. Even stepping into the water ankle-deep caused panic to set in, his heart to tighten, and his breathing to become laboured. After his ordeal, Dale began to appreciate life more. He started noticing the beauty of field flowers and the pleasing trills of birds. He realized how vibrant and fascinating the world is. The thought of losing it, all due to vanity and a desire to impress girls, was terrifying. He yearned to meet the man who had saved him from the water and offer a simple thank you, but the man never reappeared on the beach. The family returned to town, and preparations for the school year began. However, in September, Dale found that he couldn't train in the pool anymore. The water induced panic in him. He could no longer trust it and decided never to enter the pool again. At first, the coach scolded, then pleaded, and even begged. He didn't want to lose one of his most promising athletes, but it was in vain. Dale couldn't bring himself to enter the water. Even the familiar pool from his childhood now seemed dangerous and terrifying. He even stopped taking baths, only showers. He used to enjoy lounging in a tub filled with foam, finding it soothing and relaxing. But now it stirred unpleasant memories and caused hysteria. His parents, nearly losing him once, treated Dale with special care and didn't pressure him. That's when the vivid nightmares began. He could hear sounds, feel the cold sea waves, and even smell the sea in them. Over and over, he drowned, despaired, panicked, and awoke in a cold sweat. Haunted by nightmares of water, a boy chose not to worry his already anxious parents with his fears. Years later, this boy, now a mature man, lived independently in his own apartment, had a stable job as an economist for an oil company, and his salary was considered good by his city's standards. However, his dreams about water incidents still tormented him, less frequently, but just as vividly. And now, after another nightmare, Dale decided not to return to sleep. He was due to wake up in half an hour anyway. He stretched, got up and headed to the kitchen. His cat Tom appeared unexpectedly. Dale had found him as a pitiful wet kitten near a store in the rain. Unable to ignore its desperate cries, he took it home. The kitten, once frail and shabby, had grown into a handsome, well-fed cat. Dale made coffee, prepared a sandwich and enjoyed a smoke by the open window. He appreciated the perks of bachelorhood, the freedom to live as he pleased. However, at 30, his parents were keen on having grandchildren. His sister Hope was already married. Dale was content with his life, a good job, his own apartment, his girlfriend Maura, and his cherished cat. But he knew it was time to consider settling down, especially with Maura's regular hints. A decision seemed to be on the horizon. The cell phone gently vibrated. A message from Maura, light and breezy, wished good morning and reminded Dale that they were attending her friend's birthday party that day. Dale sighed. He didn't enjoy such events. Maura always seemed unnatural around her friends. She would hug him constantly, feigning excessive affection, and laugh uproaringly and playfully. However, they were a couple, and he had to respect her interests and desires. If the event was important to Maura, Dale would endure it. In the evening, Dale and Maura left the restaurant where the birthday was celebrated. Dale expressed a desire to leave early, feeling uncomfortable with the insincere, strange smiles. He was distinctly bored, unsure of how to occupy himself. Maura frowned unhappily and flirted overtly with other men. Surprisingly, Dale felt no jealousy. Now they were walking along the embankment. Maura grumbled, dissatisfied that they had left so early, while Dale, disregarding her complaints, admired the view. It was almost April, and twilight was setting in. The air was clear and fresh. Rare, thin, brittle ice floes floated along the river. Other people on the embankments also admired the river and relished the beautiful spring evening. "And yet I feel uncomfortable for you in front of people," Maura continued. She seemed oblivious to the surrounding beauty. "Did you sit all evening like a hermit? Didn't you even try to socialize? Is it that difficult to act normal?" "This isn't my thing," Dale sighed. How could he explain to Maura that the insincerity of her friends' smiles and their forced laughter made him feel down? Their discussions about the latest phone models and debates about whose car was cooler were merely annoying. It was as if there were no other conversation topics. How could Maura not see that? "Take a look at the evening," Dale smiled, gesturing towards the embankment. "If we'd stayed there, we would have missed this wonderful sunset." "You're changing the topic again?" Maura frowned. "You always do that." "The evening is just an evening, rather unpleasant and cold. I'm starting to feel chilly. Let's call a taxi. Your idea of taking a walk was foolish." "All right, a taxi it is," Dale agreed easily. How about we go to your place?" Maura's voice visibly softened, and a smile played on her face. Dale was aware that his girlfriend had been eagerly awaiting for a marriage proposal, or at least an invitation to move in together. He understood perfectly her expectations, but still was not ready to share his bachelor pad with her. Dating and spending time together were enough for him. At times, he felt guilty for keeping her waiting, especially after dating for such a long time. It seemed like they should be preparing for a wedding. Maura frequently dropped hints, which made it clear she was ready. Despite this, Dale continued to delay. He was trying to figure out whether he didn't want to marry at all, or if Maura was simply not the right person for him. Lately, he was leaning towards the latter. It baffled him how he hadn't noticed their differences before. The constant arguments over small things were becoming a routine. In the early stages of their relationship, these issues were non-existent. Maura supported him in everything, and it seemed as though they had similar views on life, but now she was increasingly disappointing him. But Dale was not eager to end the relationship, as there were many good aspects to it. He hoped this was just a rough phase, a crisis that would pass, and everything would return to normal. "Yes, let's go to my place." Dale smiled gently. Maura brightened up and linked her arm with his, while Dale wrapped his arm around her waist. Suddenly, Dale noticed something unusual on the bridge. Although there were few people due to the cold, a woman in a coat, trying to control a mischievous little girl, caught his attention. The child kept trying to reach through the bridge's railing. Dale sensed an impending tragedy. Maura was talking, but Dale was too focused on the situation unfolding on the bridge to listen. Why didn't the woman simply pick up her daughter and move away from the edge? Didn't she see the danger? The girl was small and could easily fit through the bars. Then the unthinkable happened. The girl slipped from the woman's grasp, propelled towards the railing. The wide-set bars didn't stop her, and she tumbled into the water like a bright ball. Dale watched in horror, the moment seeming to happen in slow motion. The girl fell down into the icy water, and the air was pierced by a terrified, desperate scream from the woman. "What's wrong with her?" Maura asked, not having noticed what had transpired. "The child fell into the water," Dale replied. He was already sprinting towards the fence, separating the sidewalk from the shore, shedding his hat and down jacket along the way. Onlookers gathered on the bridge, some calling for rescuers or an ambulance. Dale knew he had to act fast. There was no one else to help her, except him. "What are you doing?" Maura tried to grip the sleeve of his sweater. "You can't swim! Stop! If you do this, you'll never see me again!" Maura shouted in desperation, hoping to dissuade him. But Dale kicked off his shoes and waded into the water. The cold rushed over his body, chilling, stiffening, terrifying. But he took a deep breath and plunged further into the icy water, now up to his chest. Fear resurfaced as memories from his childhood flashed before his eyes. The moment 12-year-old Dale nearly drowned. Panic threatened to take over, but he forcefully suppressed it. There was no time for fear now. Dale had hoped the river would be shallow, but just a few meters from the shore the river became too deep. Gathering his courage, he swam, feeling like a dolphin again. His body responded well, and the water no longer seemed dangerous or mysterious. He found himself wondering why he had avoided swimming for so long. Ice floes obstructed his path, slowing him down. They were cold, brittle and prickly. Thinking of how terrified the girl must be gave Dale the strength to push on. People were running along the shore, shouting directions and encouragement, but no one else dared to enter the water. In such conditions, only a professional swimmer could manage. The gap between Dale and the little girl was quickly closing. Even though his strength was dwindling, his limbs numbing from the cold, and his face oddly hot, he couldn't entertain the thought of failing. It was down to him. Soon he was close enough to reach the girl's red cap with its large pom-pom. He stretched out his arm, grabbing her shoulder. He expected her to cling to him, but she felt limp and lifeless. Fear surged within him. Was he too late? With one hand holding the child and the other paddling towards the shore, Dale moved towards the crowd at the water's edge. He felt the faint rise and fall of the girl's breath, and exhaled in relief. It seemed she had just fainted. The shore was now close, almost within reach. Soon he would touch the bottom, and it would be easier. Much easier. He noticed the crowd on the shore becoming increasingly noisy, pointing to something on the right, and then, suddenly, his ears rang and bright spots danced before his eyes, increasing in number until darkness and silence overtook him. Dale opened his eyes to a blinding whiteness. He looked around, taking in the unfamiliar devices, blinking lights and the hum of machinery. Wires were connected to his head. Confused, he sat up, only to be overcome by dizziness and nausea. He quickly lay back down, feeling slightly better. He realized he was in a hospital. His last memory was of a shoreline and a girl collapsing in his arms. Concern for the girl overwhelmed him. Had she been rescued? But there was no one to ask. He was alone. Soon, a nurse entered the room. She approached him, apparently intending to change the IV drip.
"What happened?"
Dale asked. Was that his voice, so weak and shaky? "You're awake!" The nurse smiled broadly. "That's wonderful. I'll get the doctor right away."
"Wait,"
Dale said, holding her by the robe.
"Do you know what happened to the girl? She was drowning and I tried to save her."
"She's fine." The nurse's smile grew even wider, more welcoming. "The little girl wasn't hurt. And you're a real hero." The woman left the room. Dale was alone again, now smiling. His actions hadn't been in vain. The child was safe. He could breathe again. But he had a new question. What had happened to him? The shore had been near. Why was he in such a state? Dale couldn't remember. A few minutes later, the doctor, a tall man with tired eyes and glasses, entered the room. He shook Dale's hand, calling him a hero. He then took a flashlight from his pocket and carefully shone it into Dale's eyes after lifting the patient's eyelids. "The swelling is going down. That's good," the doctor summarized. "And you, young man, are a real hero. You've even made the news. There are videos on the internet. News sites are all writing about you. We need to let the press know you've regained consciousness. They'll want to interview you, but that's for later, when you're stronger." Dale shuddered. He didn't like all the attention. "You're a swimmer, aren't you?" the doctor asked. "You jumped into the icy water without a second thought. The current was so strong."
"I used to swim, a long time ago as a child."
"If it wasn't for you, that girl wouldn't have a chance. But don't worry, she's been taken to the children's hospital for a checkup. She has no injuries. You were less fortunate, but she had her second birthday that day."
"What about me?"
the man asked. You were unlucky. A heavy log carried by the current crashed into you near the shore. Despite people's attempts to warn you, it hit you. The blow landed on your head, but thankfully you were near the shore, and you and the girl were pulled ashore. The ambulance was already on its way due to the emergency call, so help arrived quickly. A large hematoma formed in your brain from the blow. An urgent, extensive and dangerous operation was necessary. The outcome of this intervention was unpredictable, but without surgery you wouldn't have survived. There were no predictions, admitted the doctor. But there is justice in the world. You've woken up. The whole hospital is celebrating. Everyone was very concerned about you. Everything will be fine now. However, the doctor was premature in his assurance. Dale didn't improve. He felt dizzy with the slightest movement. He wasn't transferred from the ICU to a regular ward due to his weakness and instability. The doctors did everything they could, but there was little improvement. Dale couldn't leave his bed, often felt nauseous, and frequently suffered from headaches. He spent most of his time in a semi-conscious state. He was plagued by reoccurring nightmares about drowning and the new ones where he couldn't save a girl. She kept slipping from his grasp and sinking to the bottom while he watched helplessly. It was terrifying. The doctor allowed Dale's family and friends to visit him, but ensured their visits were brief. Dale was very frail, and any unnecessary excitement could harm him. Dale's parents were the first to enter the ward. He was delighted to see them. His mother appeared tearful and worried, while his father maintained composure, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. "We are proud of you," his father said, taking a seat on the edge of the bed.
"Why did you put yourself at risk like that?"
his mother sobbed, embracing her son.
"You could have died, especially since you haven't swum in so long. It's terrifying to think what could have happened."
"I had no other choice," Dale admitted. Yes, he was in a critical condition now, but he and the girl he saved were alive. That was what mattered. His friends also visited. They showed Dale internet clips about him, lifted his spirits and updated him on the news. However, Maura never visited him at the hospital. Dale didn't miss her, but he was curious. One morning, the doctor entered the intensive care unit with a beaming smile. "The latest examination results are promising," he informed Dale. "The new treatment is producing remarkable results. We're making progress." Dale smiled in response. He had been feeling better and could even sit up for a while. His recovery was progressing slowly but steadily. He felt better each passing day, his strength and energy returning. The improvement was undeniable. Eventually, he was allowed to stand. With the doctor's help, Dale walked to the window and back. He noticed spring was in full bloom. He wished he could go outside, breathe in the fresh air and stroll around the hospital square. A few days later, Dale was transferred to a general ward. His surroundings immediately felt more comfortable, simpler and friendlier. He had people to converse with, and he felt strong and healthier each day. On the first day, when visits without special permission were allowed, she came. "Go downstairs. There's a woman waiting for you," said the nurse who entered the room. Dale slowly descended the stairs, taking pleasure in his regained freedom. He expected to find Maura in the lobby. He had asked friends and family why she hadn't visited him, but they all sidestepped the question. Dale concluded that she was likely too afraid to see a loved one in intensive care, given her sensitivity and emotional nature. Now that he was in the general ward, he believed she would come to see him. However, the lobby was empty, except for a single woman. It wasn't Maura. This woman was slender, tall, with large eyes that conveyed both strength and fragility. Her long brown hair fell in waves down to her shoulders, catching the sunlight beautifully. Dale found himself admiring the stranger, her precise facial features and graceful movements reminiscent of the dancers in Degas's paintings, despite her merely sitting in a chair with no intention of dancing. Upon noticing Dale, the woman jumped up and rushed toward him. There was no doubt she had come to see him. "Good evening," Dale smiled. "Have we met before?" "How to say," began the woman, visibly embarrassed. "I know a lot about you, Dale, but you haven't met me yet. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gladys." "Pleased to meet you," Dale responded, keeping a close eye on the woman. Her voice, movements and demeanour all seemed charming, captivating, and oddly familiar. It was an odd but pleasant sensation. You saved my daughter. And me too." Suddenly it all made sense. This was the mother of the girl he'd saved. Dale found it difficult to look away from her large blue eyes, which contrasted beautifully with her coffee and milk skin. The realization that this beautiful woman had a daughter, and likely a husband, was disappointing and almost painful. "So, the girl on the bridge was your daughter?" he asked. "Yes," Gladys confirmed, nodding. "That was Sophie. She threw a tantrum right there on the bridge. I couldn't hold on to her. She broke free from my grasp, slipped, and fell down." Taking a deep breath, Gladys relived the horrifying moments that could have forever altered her life. Dale instinctively put his arm around her shoulders, offering comfort and support in her time of need. "What are you so worried about? It's all behind you now. Is your daughter okay now?" "She's fine,"
Gladys nodded. And it's all thanks to you. Where is she now? She's in the hospital. What? In which hospital? Dale was distressed. The man had spent over a month in the hospital, and although he was still recovering from his serious trauma, he had been told the girl was virtually unharmed. So why was she in the hospital for a second month? Was the truth still being kept from him to avoid causing worry? No, Sophie is not in the hospital because of that incident, Gladys quickly assured him, noticing Dale's agitation. Or rather, not directly because of it. It wasn't the water that hurt her. I don't understand, the man admitted. I'll explain now. Our story is not a simple one. The 6-year-old Sophie was an unusual child. She was born healthy and strong. For the first year she developed like any other child, but then the relatives started noticing peculiarities about the little girl. She didn't show interest in people, fixated on the same objects and actions, and was frightened of sharp sounds. She preferred silence and solitude, while her peers were actively exploring the world. Instead, Sophie sat in the sandbox, filling and emptying a bucket of sand, over and over again. Sophie's tantrums began about 1.5 years ago. Any small thing could trigger her. It was unpredictable. Suddenly, Sophie would lose control, screaming frantically and writhing as if terrified. Finally, Gladys took her to a neurologist. The experienced doctor referred them to a specialized medical center. There, Sophie was diagnosed with an incurable condition. The doctor warned that Sophie would never lead a typical life, and without rigorous rehabilitation, she might stop responding to the world entirely. Gladys had a hard time accepting the diagnosis. She cried at night, hoping for a mistake, but Sophie's behavior continued to worsen. Gladys knew she had to pull herself together and focus on her daughter's treatment. My parents have been very supportive, especially my father, Gladys admitted. He takes on so much. He regularly takes Sophie to the dolphins. He says they help her. He also takes her to the racetrack. They spend a lot of time together. He definitely wouldn't have allowed that tantrum on the bridge. That evening, Gladys took her daughter for a walk along the embankment before bedtime. Such walks always helped the girl to sleep better. Everything was calm and nothing indicated any impending trouble. Thanks to regular rehabilitation, the little girl was more serene, with seizures becoming increasingly rare. But then, suddenly, a dog barked loudly. A large, white, clearly friendly dog being walked on a leash by a passerby. The dog certainly meant no harm, merely wagging its tail enthusiastically to greet them, but its sudden loud bark startled the girl. Sophie quivered, her complexion paled and her face contorted. Gladys knew what was coming. She rushed to her daughter, holding her tight. The calm of the embankment was shattered by Sophie's piercing scream. She struggled in her mother's arms, tears streaming from her tightly shut eyes. Gladys tried to restrain her, but Sophie was not a 2-year-old anymore. She was growing, getting stronger, and during these episodes, her strength seemed to double or even triple. Gladys, being fragile, could not restrain her daughter, who broke free and ran towards the bridge railings. And what happened next? All Gladys could do was watch as her child fell from the embankment into the dark, cold waters below. I would have jumped after her, Gladys began to explain. I was almost ready. I ran to the fence, but someone held me back. I watched her being carried away by the current, and I was helpless. I can't even swim. My father tried to teach me many times, but it never worked out. Gladys screamed, pleading for someone to save her child, calling out for Sophie and for some reason, her dad. It felt like no one in the world could help them, but her father, who would have surely fixed everything and saved everyone as always, was not there. He and her mother were on their way to the other side of the country to visit relatives, and Gladys, left alone, was struggling to cope. She blamed herself for Sophie being in the cold water. It was her negligence as a mother. Gladys, then resolved to jump into the water. No one would hold her back. How could she live without her daughter, and with this heavy burden of guilt on her soul? And then she saw a man on the bank shedding his clothes as he rushed toward the icy river. Sophie was relatively close to this man. There was hope, a real chance of a safe resolution. I was mentally judging you then, cheering you on. You were my only hope. I was so grateful for your courage, for your disregard for your own safety. While others just watched, you rushed to my aid. And then this log on the shore. I went into the water with other men to pull you out of the water after you bumped into that unfortunate log. Luckily at that time, paramedics arrived. They quickly examined you, loaded you onto a stretcher, covered you with a thermal blanket and took to the hospital. Sophie and I were taken to the children's hospital. We spent a couple of days there while she underwent examinations. Thankfully everything turned out to be normal and they let us go. That's when I found out about your condition. It wasn't difficult to find out. It was a high-profile story. You were seriously ill after the surgery. There was a significant chance you could have been left disabled. Really? Dale was surprised. They didn't tell me that. I believe your parents requested that you not be told, Gladys replied with a smile. I've gotten to know them quite well during this time. They're wonderful people. They mentioned that you almost drowned as a child. Since then, you never even dipped a foot in the water, and yet here you were, rushing to save a child. It was an automatic reaction, Dale said, smiling in return. I can't even begin to tell you how relieved I am that the girl is all right. But you mentioned she was in the hospital. Sophie is a special child, Gladys sighed sadly. We try to protect her from stress and unnecessary worries. It's not good for her. And the incident certainly wasn't helpful. That's why she had to be hospitalized so unexpectedly. But she's doing much better now. Much better. That's good, Dale smiled. I'm glad to hear that. I don't even know how to thank you, Gladys admitted. You saved my daughter's life, and mine as well. I feel that anything I do won't be enough. Oh no, protested Dale. It was a natural act. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Still, I do feel guilty about your condition. Do you need anything? Medication, a checkup, anything at all? I spoke to my father, and he, along with my mother, will be in town soon. We're all willing to help you in any way we can. I'm embarrassed by all this, Dale confessed. You should use the money for your daughter's treatment. You must be going through a hard time. I think I've repaid my debt. Dale felt as though the incident on the embankment was not an accident. He had spent his life feeling guilty for not thanking his saviour. Now, having saved a child himself, he felt a sense of closure. To alleviate Gladys's guilt, he shared his story with her. It turned out she already knew it from his parents. It seemed that they had been communicating with her frequently. Where is the girl's father? Dale dared to ask that had been bothering him for a while. Gladys frequently talked about her own father, but she never mentioned her husband. What kind of father is he? Gladys asked with a bitter grin. Sophie is only mine. I was once by the sea with my friends during my student days. We enjoyed the sun, beach and laughter. I had a fleeting resort romance with a fellow student. We didn't exchange contacts because we didn't plan to continue, and our feelings fizzled out by the end of the vacation. Back home I realized I was expecting a child, and I couldn't bear to give it up. That's how Sophie came into my life. Yes, I'm such a fool, Gladys smiled. But I don't regret anything. Even after learning about my daughter's diagnosis, I have not regretted it once. My parents are a great help. They love Sophie. To me, she is the meaning of life. The news that Gladys was unmarried unexpectedly pleased Dale. He immediately felt more confident. Oddly enough, he found himself wanting to see Gladys again, to talk to her. Her presence filled him with joy and energy. Visiting hours are over, the stern nurse announced. Can I come again? Gladys asked. I'll be waiting for you. Dale smiled, giving her palm a gentle squeeze. He couldn't stop thinking about his captivating visitor. Her beautiful face, delicate yet strong, resurfaced in his mind. Raising a challenging child alone was no small feat. He found himself wanting to please, protect, and defend Gladys. Oddly, Maura had never invoked such feelings in Dale. Even at the start of their relationship, Maura. She still hadn't shown up at the hospital and hadn't answered her phone. Friends and relatives remained silent, revealing nothing. Dale began to worry. Could they be hiding something? Had something happened to Maura? "Nothing has happened to her," Kevin sneered as Dale's friend and colleague he had stopped by after work. "So what's going on then? Why isn't she showing up or answering her phone?" "All right, I'll tell you. We've been trying to keep you out of this, to avoid upsetting you. But I can see that you not knowing is causing you even more stress." Finally, someone understands. "Your Maura is a traitor," concluded Kevin. "And for the record, I've never particularly liked her. She's materialistic and insincere." "Well, you be careful." Dale was displeased to hear these words about his girlfriend. "Whatever you say," Kevin shrugged. "After all, she left you, betrayed you, when she learned you might become disabled." "I don't understand." "You didn't know, but the doctors gave me a grim prognosis after the surgery. I didn't understand all the details, but the main point was you might end up in a wheelchair, with your lower body and an arm failing." Dale exhaled. He was almost glad he hadn't known about the looming danger. It spared him the anxiety and worry. And Maura, as soon as she heard about it, left immediately. She said she wasn't prepared to care for a disabled person. That's all there is to it. "Well, we can't fault her for that." Dale shook his head. Did this news cause him pain? Perhaps not. It was difficult to expect any different from Maura. In fact, he felt a sense of relief. Maura would no longer be in his life. That was a good thing. Their relationship had been a burden on Dale, and he was tired of perpetually feeling guilty in front of her. "She's already seeing someone else, quick to move on." Kevin's voice was tinged with resentment for his friend. "She's out clubbing, always flaunting her fun times on social media." "Let her be. I'm genuinely happy for her," Dale replied with a smile. "So you're not even upset?" "Upset? I was facing potential paralysis, but now I'm walking, even running. How could I be upset?" "You're right," Kevin said, smiling broadly. "Once you're discharged, we're going fishing. And this time you won't refuse. You swim better with us to the other side. I know you can swim. The internet is full of the videos of it from different angles. The whole city has seen." Gladys visited again. This time, Dale eagerly awaited her arrival. Spotting her familiar silhouette in the lobby, he couldn't suppress a joyous smile. They strolled around the hospital square, conversing. Gladys's parents were already en route. She was waiting. She missed him dearly and was exhausted from loneliness. "How's your daughter?" Dale asked. Now he was very much interested in Sophie's fate. He wanted everything to be well for this girl, that a long, happy life awaited her. "She's getting better. She'll be discharged soon." "Oh, that's good to hear. I should be discharged in a week at most, according to the doctor. I'm tired of being confined within these four walls. Perhaps... could I have your phone number?" "Of course," Gladys said, clearly pleased. She gave Dale her number. "I'll definitely call," he promised. Dale felt a certain warmth from Gladys, a feeling that she might like him too. It filled him with a light, sunny, warm sensation. Sophie's illness didn't scare him. He felt good with Gladys, and it was clear. Dale felt he was ready to move mountains for Gladys. Finally, he was discharged from the hospital. His doctor, while handing over the discharge papers, confessed surprise at the recovery. Just a month ago, he had had little hope for such a positive outcome. "You're fully recovered and healthy," the doctor said in awe. "Miracles do occur in our line of work, but your case is truly extraordinary. The injuries were so severe, and now it's as if nothing ever happened. There must be some higher justice at play here. You saved a child." Thank you for everything you've done for me, Dale gratefully responded. He witnessed and appreciated the doctor's and staff's efforts. Pulled from the other side of the world, he was now back on his feet. Surprisingly, he now has nearly 3 birthdays to celebrate. Coming home after a long absence felt like true happiness. Tom, his cat, rejoiced at his return, curling up on his lap. Friends had taken turns caring for Tom during Dale's absence. Dale savoured a warm shower, ordered pizza and started a movie. Today marked the last day of his sick leave. Tomorrow he would return to work and resume his regular life, making up for lost time. And in the evening, he would finally take Gladys out on a proper date. They planned to stroll around the city centre before heading to the movie theatre. After the movie, Dale intended to take Gladys to a restaurant. It was a classic, albeit unoriginal date. But the location didn't matter. What mattered was being with Gladys, not in the hospital square, but in freedom. Not as a patient in the trauma ward, but as what? Her other half? Her beloved? Dale smiled at the thought. Gladys arrived at the date, unexpectedly not alone. She was holding Sophie's hand tightly. There was no one to leave her with. She shrugged her shoulders guiltily. My parents have not yet returned, and the neighbour, the one who usually babysits, suddenly felt ill. I didn't even have an opportunity to warn you. Dale looked at the little girl he had once rescued. Sophie had big eyes and was pretty like her mother. 2 blonde pigtails stuck out from under a thin knitted cap. Sophie also regarded Dale with interest. It was doubtful she remembered him. However, Sophie suddenly smiled at Dale, broadly and sincerely. Wow, Gladys marvelled. She's usually afraid of strangers. I was even worried she'd become hysterical. As if to contradict her mother, Sophie suddenly extended her hand to Dale. He smiled and gently squeezed it. Looks like we're going to be friends. Well, given this change of plans, how about we go to the ice cream cafe? I'll go anywhere with you, Gladys replied, blushing slightly. Dale beamed at her words. Dale, Gladys and little Sophie enjoyed a pleasant walk along the city streets. Sophie, walking hand in hand with the adults and occasionally riding on Dale's neck, completed their picture-perfect family. Although Sophie seldom spoke, Dale intuitively understood her needs. For instance, when she became tense at the sight of a pony carrying children, he steered them down a narrow alley to avoid it. She's so calm and cheerful with you, Gladys noted, much to Dale's delight. They soon arrived at a wonderful playground, complete with slides, swings, sports equipment, fairy houses, and even a winding labyrinth. Despite the enticing array of amusements, Sophie clung tightly to Dale's hand, displaying little interest. Dale placed Sophie on a swing with a comfortable chair and gently pushed, and Sophie eventually began to move with the swing's rhythm, clearly enjoying herself. This allowed Dale a moment to converse privately with Gladys, a moment he had been eagerly anticipating. They sat on a bench hand in hand, watching Sophie. I'm sorry about this, the woman said, her gaze shifting towards her daughter. I really wanted to spend this evening with only you. It's okay, Dale replied. I've longed to see you outside the hospital walls. This walk is wonderful. Yes, it's a beautiful evening. You know, Dale said, taking a chance to be candid, I think I can't live without you. I think about you all the time. This has never happened to me before. Gladys smiled, her eyes sparkling with quiet joy. It was clear she was pleased by Dale's words. Me too, she said, looking straight into his eyes. I feel the same way. With you I feel calm, good, and so joyful. I don't know how to describe it. That's great. Dale lightly wrapped his arm around Gladys's shoulders, but the shadow of sadness that darkened her beautiful face disconcerted him. I'm not entitled to all this. What do you mean? Dale asked, confused. Gladys had become tense, which disturbed him. He longed for their usual relaxed interaction. "I don't have the right to ruin your life. Sophie, she will never be like the others." "Don't even think like that. I love you, and we will get through this together. Please don't let such thoughts bother you any more," Dale confessed, his words flowing easily. He wished for Gladys to smile, perhaps even hug him, and stop worrying about what could potentially ruin his life. It wasn't like that at all. However, Gladys merely shook her head. Several weeks passed. Dale returned to work. His colleagues hailed him as a hero. First, it was due to the sensational story of rescuing a girl, and second, Dale had a lot of cases to handle that only he could manage. "You saved the child. Now, save us," the chief joked, handing Dale a stack of documents to process. "And prepare yourself. We're moving you to the planning department. You'll be leading it now." What a turnaround, Dale smiled. He had long awaited this position. It was interesting, and most importantly, it paid significantly more. "You deserve it," exclaimed Kevin, clapping Dale on the shoulder. Dale continued to see Gladys almost every evening. Her parents returned to the city, and Sophie often stayed with them now. But Dale found himself missing the girl, and would sometimes ask to take her for a walk. He enjoyed pleasing and surprising her. Seeing her smile meant a lot to him. He would always think of something interesting for her, such as visiting a husky kennel or a reserve with deer and roe deer. They also enjoyed forest walks. Although the little girl couldn't express her feelings in words, it was clear that she loved her saviour Dale with all her heart. One warm spring evening, Dale and Gladys were walking along the embankment. "You know, I first noticed you at this very spot," Dale suddenly recalled, "and you were over there on the bridge." "It's frightening to even think about that night," Gladys admitted. "But on the other hand, we never would have met otherwise." "I think we would have met anyway." Dale hugged Gladys tightly. "I would have found you for sure." "By the way, my parents, I've told them so much about you, they're eager to meet you. Do you mind?" "Why would I mind? Of course. I'm okay with it," Dale responded. "You see, even if we didn't have our relationship, my father would still want to meet you. You saved Sophie, his favourite. He's truly grateful to you. And my mother too. They want to thank you." "No need," Dale protested. "I was just returning a favour. I was once saved too. That man took a risk. There were sizable waves in the sea. But fate has already rewarded me. I've never felt this way about anyone before you. By the way, I take a vacation coming up in a month. I was thinking, maybe we could go to the sea. You, me and Sophie." "Really?" Gladys's eyes lit up with joy. "But didn't you say you were afraid of the water?" "I guess after that incident my phobia disappeared. You know, I even enjoyed being in the water despite the circumstances. It's a pleasure I had forgotten." The meeting with Gladys's parents had to be postponed. Sophie fell ill, and Gladys couldn't spare any time these days either. Dale missed them. He bought toys and fruit for the girl and delivered the package to Gladys's house. Her parents were out visiting someone. That same evening, Dale received a call from Maura. He was surprised to see her name on the cell phone screen. He had thought she had forgotten about him. "Hi, how are you doing?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. "I'm doing fine," Dale replied. "I know it's good." Maura's voice suddenly turned respectful. "They say you're dating the mother of the girl you saved." "Yes," replied Dale briefly. "It's true. We are dating." "You were quick to forget me." Dale grimaced. Maura had left him during a difficult time while he was in the hospital, and now she was making claims. "It was you who left me first," he reminded the woman on the other end of the line. "You don't know anything. I have a lot to explain. Why don't we meet?" "Let's do it over the phone right now." "This is a delicate conversation. It's better to meet in person." Well, okay. In an hour at our usual cafe. When Dale arrived there, Maura was already sitting at a table by the window. She looked wonderful. Light makeup, a dress that emphasized her figure. It was clear she had tried, but why? Did she want to win him back? That wouldn't be possible. "Hello," Dale greeted, taking a seat next to her. Maura smiled sweetly and openly at him. The grumpy, perpetually dissatisfied girl she had lately become was nowhere to be seen. "I understand everything. You thought I betrayed you. You thought I abandoned you in the hospital in serious condition." "To be honest, it did look that way." "That's exactly how it looked. I just needed to come to my senses. There's so much on my mind. You were in the hospital. You were injured right in front of me. It was horrible. I thought you were dead. And then I received the news." What news?" "Well, the night we were walking along the promenade, and it all happened. I wanted to tell you that I'm expecting a baby." Dale recoiled from Maura. "A child? What child? That's impossible." His eyes darkened. "But you were drinking at your friend's birthday party. Why, if you knew it could harm the baby? If you were pregnant?" He didn't mean to say that. He was at a loss for words. He recalled that Maura was never without a glass of wine at the party. "I was just pretending, filling my glass with soda to avoid questions," she responded. "And now what?" Dale asked, still in shock. "It's okay," Maura reassured him, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm expecting a baby. Our baby. I think it's a boy." "Why did you keep it a secret for so long?" Dale asked, still reeling from the news. His life had been going so well, and now this was like a bolt from the blue. He thought of Gladys's likely disbelief. His heart clenched at the thought of telling her. "At first I wasn't sure if you'd survive. Then they said you'd be disabled," Maura explained. "I was scared. A child requires so much time and care, and if I also had to care for a disabled person, I didn't think I could handle it. That's why I kept quiet." "I need to think about it," Dale said, standing up from the table. "I'll give it some thought and then we'll decide what to do." "I know you're seeing that girl, the mother of the girl you saved." Maura held up her hand. "But there's a stranger's child there, and a sick one too, and here, he'll be ours. Our own. Do you understand? Healthy and dear. Do you understand?" "Maura, I need time," Dale repeated, removing her hand. "I'll call you, I promise." "I'll be waiting. Very much. After all, I love you." At home, Dale turned on the television for background noise and sank into the sofa. What a revelation. It had been easy to view Maura as a mercenary traitor who had left him in a tough spot. The problem had resolved itself and Dale's conscience was clear. But now this. He was going to have a child, his own. 6 months ago this news would have delighted him, but now his life was Gladys. How complicated everything had become. However, if Maura really was pregnant with his child, Dale would never abandon him. In the morning at work, Dale was quiet and moody. Naturally, Kevin noticed. By lunchtime, he walked into his friend's office. "What's wrong?" Kevin asked, taking a seat in the visitor's chair. "Oh, nothing. The past just reared its head at an inconvenient time." "Maura, is she—" Kevin had always been particularly perceptive. Dale nodded. "Send her away. She found out you'd been promoted, so she showed up right away. Maura has always been a mercenary and calculating person. But I hope you told her the position was taken." "She knew it herself." "What a weasel." Kevin grinned. "I wish I'd seen her face when you blew her off." "I didn't," sighed Dale. "Maura is expecting a child from me. I don't know what to do about it." "Wait a minute," Kevin quickly thought. "Something doesn't add up with what I know about her. She was out clubbing and drinking while you were in the hospital. I even saw a picture on social media. That doesn't sound like the behaviour of a pregnant woman. I don't know. Maybe the stress was getting to her. Are you sure it's actually your baby? While the doctors were trying to save your life, she was dating someone else. Dale shrugged. How could he be even sure of anything? If it's your baby, the due date would be around 3 months, maybe even a little more. Kevin continued to ponder aloud. I'd check it out if I were you. How? Go to an ultrasound together. They'll tell you exactly when it's due, and everything will be clear. Kevin's idea intrigued Dale. Going with Maura to the ultrasound could imply distrust, which might offend her. However, he called to his ex-girlfriend and arranged a meeting at a cafe near the medical centre, asking her to arrive at a specific time. He did not reveal the real reason for the meeting, suspecting that Maura would refuse and find numerous excuses to avoid the procedure. Dale arrived at the cafe well before the agreed time. Fortunately, it was not crowded, as he anticipated that Maura might cause a scene. She had always loved theatrics. Finally, Maura burst into the cafe, slender, beautiful, adorned in a light white dress. Her face split into the sweetest smile at the sight of Dale. Confident in her victory due to the undeniable argument of being pregnant with his child. However, Dale's mention of an ultrasound appointment in 15 minutes sent her into a fury. I'm not going anywhere. I won't unnecessarily expose my baby to ultrasound. It's harmful. I'll end up with a sickly baby, like your new girlfriend. An ultrasound is necessary at your stage of pregnancy, Dale gently countered. I've researched. It's time for your first screening. Let's go together. We'll resolve all doubts at once. But I refuse. Is it that you don't trust me? I don't trust you, Dale admitted. How can I trust you when you acted so strangely while I was in the hospital? But if we get the ultrasound and you're right, I'll be extremely embarrassed. I won't go, Maura continued to resist. It's downright humiliating. Why don't you trust me? Because we haven't spoken in so long. Then you suddenly appear and reveal this news, and I'm already seeing someone else. I have a right to know for sure. Don't you agree? Screw you, Maura retorted, throwing a glass of water in Dale's face. Dale was relieved he hadn't ordered coffee. I'll raise the child without you. If you have nothing to hide, prove to me what a scoundrel I am. From Maura's confused look, Dale had already surmised the truth. Naturally, Maura was not pregnant, but he needed solid proof to dispel all doubts. There's nothing to prove, Maura suddenly hissed. Her plan had utterly failed. You're not a sneak, but a fool. If we had been together, if we had married, I would have given you a healthy child and been an excellent wife. But you're stuck with that woman and her disabled daughter. Why would you want that kind of happiness? You must be a fool. So, there's no baby after all. That's what I suspected. You suspected correctly. Yes, there's no baby. I fabricated the whole story to prevent you from ruining your life. I wanted to save the fool. I thought you didn't know how to escape from these people. Such a splendid opportunity offered. And you... Maura, Dale said, his tone suddenly softening. The news that Maura was not pregnant was a relief. It removed any obstacles to Dale's relationship with Gladys. Everything else seemed insignificant. Dale felt neither anger nor irritation towards Maura. What now? The woman looked at him sternly and demandingly. I'll manage my own life, okay? And you sort out yours. Dale left the cafe upbeat, feeling light and calm. He met Gladys in the evening. After a brief separation, their encounter was particularly joyful. Just being near her was pure happiness. It was time to decide. Dale couldn't bear the thought of parting with Gladys. He needed to see her daily and constantly feel her presence. Gladys, somewhat shyly, mentioned that her parents wanted to meet Dale and expected him to visit. I tried to dissuade them, but my father insists. Why did you try to dissuade them? Dale didn't understand. Well, it all seems too official. Or something. What if you didn't want to? I'm just the opposite, Dale smiled. I want to meet them. They should know the man who will soon take their daughter and granddaughter with him. Assuming the daughter and granddaughter don't mind, of course. Gladys, I love you. You know that. I think it's time we got married. And I plan to adopt Sophie. Do you have any objections? Me? Gladys looked at Dale with wide eyes, a happy smile appearing on her face. Of course not. A proposal is probably done differently. I'm not sure. I'm not good at this sort of thing, but I'll make it right later. There will be a restaurant and a ring. I just wanted to know your thoughts sooner rather than later. Before meeting Gladys's parents, Dale was nervous. He prepared, bought a bouquet for the mother of his beloved, and chose a bottle of good cognac for her father. Of course, he didn't forget about Sophie. He always surprised her. This time he found a funny cat from the girl's favourite cartoon in the store. At the designated time, Dale stood outside the apartment door, hesitant to ring the bell. What if Gladys's parents didn't accept him? What if they didn't like him? However, upon seeing Gladys's mother's joyful face, he calmed down. The elder woman, with eyes resembling her daughter's, greeted him with a welcoming smile. You must be Dale, she asked. Gladys has been telling me all about you. You're exactly how I pictured. At that moment, Gladys and Sophie appeared. Both joyfully rushed to the guest and embraced him. Dale was led into the drawing room, where the table had already been set. Where is the head of the family? Dale inquired. He was urgently called to work. He'll be here soon, Gladys responded. Gladys's mother shared amusing stories from her daughter's childhood. The conversation flowed naturally. Dale observed that Gladys's parents were much older than his own. Their only child was born late. Logically, Gladys should have been a spoiled princess, but that was not the case. Finally, a tall, elderly man entered the living room. Sophie immediately ran to him. The man picked up his granddaughter with ease, kissed her, and then extended his hand to Dale. Dale couldn't take his eyes off the man's face. Dark skin, broad dark eyebrows, attentive brown eyes, and a scar. A thin, whitish scar running from his forehead to his upper lip. It was him, the man who had saved him from drowning years ago. The man he had been too stunned to thank. He had aged, but the scar was unmistakably the same. As soon as Dale was alone with Gladys's father, he followed him outside for a smoke. I don't know how to thank you for granddaughter, Gladys's father said as he lit a cigarette. Our whole life is in her. You showed courage. You didn't fear the cold water, the ice floes, or the current. I owe you one. I'll do anything for you. Just ask. Actually, I was repaying a debt for you, Dale replied. Do you remember vacationing 18 years ago near the sea? Yes, I do. The older man nodded, studying Dale's face. And you saved a teenager who foolishly swam into a light storm far from shore. Yes, something like that happened. How do you know? So, it was you, Dale exclaimed. I recognize that scar. I was that boy. I've regretted all these years that I never got the chance to thank you. My father and I tried to find you later, but we couldn't. We went home that same night. I had come to say goodbye to the sea with my daughter, but then I noticed you. I left her on the shore to help you. That incident
entirely changed my life. You disappeared immediately and I was desperate to find you. Now look at us, reunited after all these years." "I rushed back to Gladys," the man confessed. "She was alone on the shore. I feared someone might take her, or that she might go into the water without me. She was tiny, just like Sophie is now. She came late in our life, you noticed, didn't you?" Dale nodded. "We had a son, handsome and smart. He wasn't born early. He was returning from the army when he was attacked on a train, robbed and thrown out while it sped along. He didn't survive. My wife and I thought our lives were over. But then Gladys was born, and she brought us back to life. And then came Sophie. They're everything to us." "I understand. I'll protect them and take good care of them." "I trust you, lad." Gladys's father clapped Dale on the shoulder amiably, then added, "If I hadn't saved you, a teenager, from the water that day, no one would have been there to save my Sophie. God works in mysterious ways."